Hello everyone, my name is Casey. Today I would like to talk to you why breastfeeding is not always the best. I became a mom just this past Tuesday, and with becoming a mom, I have learned that breastfeeding is not always the best. As many other new moms, I was visited in the hospital when I had my daughter by the lactation consultant once my daughter was born to help me with the process of breastfeeding her. I'm not going to lie, breastfeeding has probably been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. When the lactation consultant visit, they choose to push feeding your infant or your baby breast milk only, which is ideally. But when they ask you questions like if you can supplement formula, how do you know if your newborn's getting enough? Those are very tricky questions for a new parent. So her answer to me was no, you don't want to feed both in the first month. You want to stick to breast milk only because you don't want to introduce formula yet, and you don't want to start pumping until 1 month because you want to make sure that your breast milk comes in and that it's applied very well. What two things that new moms struggle with is that the baby isn't latching or they're not producing enough milk. My problem has been that my daughter won't latch, so I would have to help her along with feeding her. Every time I fed her, every 2 to 3 hours. Well, if you have to manually feed your daughter every 2 to 3 hours, this is extremely tough. I struggled with how do I know if she's getting enough? She just seems hungry. She's fussy. She's crying when I'm trying to breastfeed her. The lactation consultant reassured me, yes, she is getting enough. My husband and I ended up taking her to her appointment a couple days later. To her first appointment, she was only about 4 days old, to check her weight. She lost 13% of her weight and was dehydrated of her weight from the 2 days prior when we were released from the hospital. As a new mom with a wave of emotions, I started crying, thinking I wasn't feeding her long enough. Why is she so sleepy? And all she would do is just sleep. The pediatrician suggested that I supplement her with formula and feed her breast milk as well, and to come back and recheck her weight the next morning to see if it has gone up. When we got home and started feeding her every 2 to 3 hours right on the dot, counted every diaper like every new concerned parent would, went back the next day to her checkup, and she had gained 9 ounces in 1 day. So it was pretty awesome. We were jumping up and down because they wanted to admit her into the hospital the following day because of her hydration. I decided that I was just going to pump and then feed her through a bottle and supplement her with formula as well, because it wasn't worth the worrying about, the anxiety, and you're already running on very little sleep. Today, people often focus on breastfeeding at the expense of a new mother's mental health and wellness. When it comes down to it, the most important thing is just making sure that your baby's belly is full and that they are getting what they need. After research, I found that breastfeeding had declined in the 1960s through 1970s due to the fact that many people thought breastfeeding was disgusting because those people could not afford formula. Many people seem to judge mothers. I see it all the time over social media, Facebook, Instagram, pushing breastfeeding, and if you see somebody pumping or anything on there, people tend to make really rude comments. So I definitely related to this. In one article, I found that a doctor was explaining a story about how her patient was using a pacifier to calm her fussy newborn, but was ridiculed because people thought it would cause nipple confusion. Studies that were done on nipple confusion and breastfeeding failed to show causality between a pacifier use and reduced rates of breastfeeding. Pacifiers may offer safety benefits, and they have been linked to decreased risk of sudden infant death syndrome, as many of you know, SIDS. People need to stop and think before posting a comment on social media, judging someone for their decision. As I often tell my grandma when we're having conversations, people just need to mind their business. So, those hurtful comments and those things can really be hard on a new mother. So I definitely can relate to a lot of new mothers out there. when they get ridiculed. Some women who don't have issues nursing develop exhaustion from breastfeeding. They end up struggling as time goes on. Breastfeeding mothers are consumed on this schedule 24 hours a day. Every 2 to 3 hours, you're getting up, you're breastfeeding your child. On the first month, if the lactation consultant is telling you you don't want to pump for a month, you want to make sure your milk supply, this can be really, really hard on a new mom. She's not sleeping. She's getting up every 2 to 3 hours, breastfeeding her baby, making sure that the baby is getting what they need. Moms begin to think that nursing becomes a chore rather than a bonding time. This leads as resentment towards partners, like the baby's father, because he doesn't have to get up and feed the baby because they're breastfeeding. Bonding time, is another thing as well. Sense of disconnection, like bonding, anxiety, and depression. So for your sanity, bottle feeding, whether it's breast milk or formula, can help greatly in preserving your sanity, but also for your appreciation for the love of the new journey that you just embarked with. Formula is not only safe, but it can save your baby's life. Obviously, breast milk is the optimal source of nutrition for an infant, but with modern variety of formulas that they make these days, they are very similar in ingredients in terms of nutrients. So what your baby needs to have to grow and develop and stuff. And you see them all over in Walmart, Target, Walgreens, Infamil. There's all sorts of kinds there. In 2018, a study out of UCSF found that supplementing with formula in the first days of life does not harm the baby. Instead, babies that lost significant weight, similar to mine, providing formula reduced them rates of hospital readmission compared to the babies that were exclusively breastfed. In rare cases, a bottle of formula can be life-saving. Furthermore, supplementing with formula does not lead to premature weaning, and it does not change your baby's gut flora. Studies have also shown that a mom's mental health and intimately bound to baby short and long-term health and welfare. Consistent data indicated that maternal depression is associated with impaired child cognitive and neurodevelopment, causing behavior problems in school and beyond, and depression even into teen years. So you have these new mothers here that are breastfeeding their children, and they're told they don't want to use supplement with formula by the lactation consultants, and breast milk is best. That's all you hear from the lactation consultants. Breast milk is best. So here you have these new moms. They have lack of sleep. Like I said, you're getting up every 2 to 3 hours. You're forgetting stuff, because you're so consumed in taking care of this little tiny human that you are forgetting to take care of yourself. As many of you know, postpartum depression. So with that being said, I think, health professionals like lactation consultants need to kind of be aware of what they are saying to mothers when they're teaching them this. Some babies just aren't going to latch. They're not going to. So you're going to have to pump into a bottle and feed them from the bottle, and that's okay, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. So I think they need to be very aware of what they say, because that can be very detrimental to a new mom, to the point where she can go into postpartum depression. And this can cause problems in their newborn child years down the road. So my biggest thing is that they just need to be careful on what they're saying, and definitely need to think about the bigger picture. Breastfeeding, for whatever reason, it can, like I said, it can be detrimental to mental health. Then bottle feeding is a reasonable alternative. Just like I said, you're not wrong for bottle feeding your baby. So why are we still shaming moms to opt out of breastfeeding? Okay. Breastfeeding isn't an option for everyone. And in some cases, it may even be discouraged. There is not a wrong or right answer. The best way to feed your baby is just to feed them and do what works, whether it's breastfed, bottle fed, or formula fed. Don't beat yourself up about it. Don't feel like a failure. Babies need to be fed. The mode is not as important as the love that you provide to them while doing so. Being a mom is a long journey with countless opportunities to nourish and support your child. So just make sure your baby's fed. That's the most important thing. Don't worry about whether it's formula, whether it's breast milk. If you can't breastfeed, you can't breastfeed. But as long as you're taking care of your baby, that's all that matters. And you don't need to listen to anyone else, because use your instinct. If you think baby's not getting enough, then use your instinct, definitely. Thank you guys for listening today.